Today, I want to talk about agency and choice, specifically how women are often denied that agency, which is what makes Andersen's The Little Mermaid and the Snow Queen special. Now, for those who disagree with me about the first part, let me explain. Women are often denied the choice to make hard decisions for themselves, under the attitude that we're too fragile to handle harsh situations. The most hilarious example comes from when the steam engine train was created in 1804, and people thought a woman's uterus would fly out of her body if she dared board a train. Which doesn't make sense if you think about it, because the man's reproductive anatomy is outside their bodies, so wouldn't it be more likely? But anyway, more serious examples include how women were often barred from higher education, since the stress of academic life would destroy female health and feminine appeal. Or how women were, and still often are, barred from joining the military. Even if a woman wants to make these kind of hard decisions and chooses to undergo a life of struggle, she's not allowed to. It doesn't matter what she wants. It matters what society deems acceptable. I started upon this idea when I was thinking about the red shoes and the Little Mermaid. Essentially, a lot of people have said before that the Little Mermaid might come off as misogynistic because it puts the main character, the Little Mermaid, through a lot of suffering. She feels like she's stepping on sharp knives whenever she takes a walk on land. She feels like a sword is splitting through her when she transforms her tail. However, I didn't really agree with that. I didn't see it as misogynistic. I just thought of it as a poetic way of representing unrequited love. However, when people bring this up about the red shoes, I full-heartedly agree. The red shoes does feel painfully misogynistic. For those who don't know the story, Karen, the main character, is forced to dance day and night uncontrollably, and then only stops because she asks for an executioner to cut off her feet, and then spends the rest of her life miserable trying to repay for her sins until she eventually dies. Why, you might ask? Why? What did she do to deserve this? She liked red shoes. That's basically the reason why. It does feel misogynistic. Besides the point of demonizing vanity, which is often a trait associated with women, it just seems cruel for no reason. Why did Karen have to do this? Why was Karen forced into all these horrible things happening to her? It's just cruel. There was nothing else to it. Now, people make the same argument about The Little Mermaid, which is what got me thinking. It's how I came across the theme for this video, agency. That's the main difference in what it boils down to. Karen, the main character in the red shoes, didn't have agency. She never chose to dance forever in those red shoes. She kind of chose to have her feet cut off, but is it really a choice if you're dancing yourself to death? Not really. The Little Mermaid, on the other hand, had choice throughout her entire story. She chooses to seek out the Sea Witch. She chooses to go through with it, even though the Sea Witch read her exactly what was going to happen. People like to make that joke that Ariel should have read the terms and conditions. Oh, she did. Ursula told her the terms and conditions. Ursula didn't lie about anything. Ariel just chose the stupid decision anyway, which, yeah, maybe not the smartest decision, but again, this whole argument is about agency, how women are allowed to make these decisions, even if they're not, objectively the best decisions to make. So, for Ariel, or the Little Mermaid, while it does feel cruel to have her be stepping on sharp knives every time she walks on land, or to feel like a sword is slicing through her tail, she chose it. It was not a pain that she didn't know was going to happen or that was thrust upon her as punishment. She wholeheartedly knew what was going to happen and made that decision anyway. And there's something powerful about that because, like mentioned earlier, women often aren't allowed to make painful decisions. They aren't allowed to make decisions that might threaten their female health or feminine appeal or hurt their reproductive anatomy or whatever it is that people were worried about and sometimes still are worried about. What's even more powerful about The Little Mermaid is that she gets to make this decision throughout the entire story. She never once regrets going on land, no matter how painful it is. She chooses to even dance on land, even though it hurts, insanely. This choice is very clearly signified at the end when her sisters offer up Ariel a knife. This knife was traded through the Sea Witch. It allows Ariel to come back to the ocean if she chooses to kill the prince with this knife. Ariel doesn't make that decision. She could go back to the sea, she could be happy again, she could go back to how she was at the start without having lost too much, really. But she doesn't. She makes the decision to stay. She makes the decision to die for her love. And, well, again, that's powerful. It's, again, a choice that women aren't often allowed to make. Dying as a sacrifice in the name of love for someone that you love, it's not usually a position that women are given. It's usually a position reserved for men. Men who go on their quests of love to save the princess, to risk their lives for someone that they love. The Snow Queen is another great example of how Andersen subverts this gender norm and gives his female protagonist agency. Gerda, in this story, she's the main character. She has this person that she loves called Kay. They're like brothers and sisters, basically, not by blood, but by choice. One day, Kay gets kidnapped by the Snow Queen. Kidnapped is a bit of a harsh word for it. He chooses to go with her because of this thing with mirror shards. There's like 8 stories involved in the Snow Queen. It's a long story, but Kay is basically kidnapped with the Snow Queen. Gerda makes a decision to go out and find him. She goes on this long quest, this long adventure. She first has to try to figure out where he is. She asks a bunch of people and flowers and animals, and she gets kidnapped by some thieves at one point, and then befriends the daughter of the thieves and manages to get away. And then other things. She goes through a lot, basically. There's a lot of stuff that happens. She loses her shoes. The entire journey, she's shoeless. And, it's a lot of pain, it's a lot of suffering. It's a hard journey. It's a hard journey to make, and it's a journey that Gerda chose. Again, it's very clear that Gerda chose to make this journey. No one told her, oh, go find Kay. This is what you're supposed to do. She chooses to do it herself. And when the going gets rough, when it gets hard, she still chooses to keep going. At any point in her journey, she could go back. No one would really judge her for it either. She could just leave and be like, well, this isn't my responsibility. I love Kay, but he's gone now. Maybe this journey just isn't for me. Maybe I'm a girl and it's too dangerous. But she never makes that choice. It never even crosses her mind. She goes on this journey, she finds Kay, and she comes back victorious, hand in hand with her best friend, having not quite defeated the Snow Queen. The Snow Queen was actually never there, so she's really not that great of a villain. But yeah, she comes back victoriously with Kay, having been better off for it. I think there's also something very nice about having the main character succeed in this journey as well. Going back to the beginning of this video, women were often not allowed to go through these harsh decisions or harsh situations, specifically because they were worried that it would ruin them at the end. It's really powerful to have Gerda be better off at the end and have what she came there for. Ariel is a harder example for this. She is basically dissolved into sea foam and dies. However, I will also say that she gains her human soul at the end. That was actually her primary goal in The Little Mermaid. So the fact that she does get what she wants and is kind of better off for it. I mean, in the framing of the story, she's better off. By our modern senses of, being dead, I don't know if we would, most of us probably would not consider that to be better off, but in the framing of the story, she has a human soul, and that makes her better off than she was previously. So again, there's just something powerful about that. Something powerful about having a woman go through that struggle, choose to go through that struggle, continuously throughout the entire story, and then get what she wants, get the reward. Okay, so now people might be wondering, what's so special about that? Surely there are other fairy tales that do this too. And I'm not saying that there aren't any other fairy tales that do that, but if you really think about it, most fairy tales do not follow this structure. Let's take Beauty and the Beast, for example. Belle she ends up going to a castle and she's stuck there because her dad's getting threatened, and she's essentially stuck in the castle for pretty much the rest of her story. Let's take Snow White. She's stuck in a castle for the beginning of the story by her abusive stepmom, and then she gets threatened with a knife to leave, so she's forced to leave, and then she gets stuck in a cottage for pretty much the rest of the story again. Then Sleeping Beauty. She's stuck in a castle, and then she's sent off to a cottage by her parents, and stuck in that cottage, and then she falls asleep and is back stuck in the castle again. Then Cinderella. And I love Cinderella, by the way. This is not anything against any of these fairy tales. They're great fairy tales in their own right, and I think that they tell a lot of important morals in their own way. But this is just pointing out a general pattern. Cinderella, she's just stuck at home for the entire fairy tale, pretty much, until she goes to the ball. And then Rapunzel, stuck in a tower for most of her story, again. There's just a very common theme, I feel like, in most popular female fairy tales where the main character, the main protagonist, is just stuck somewhere. She's not allowed to leave. She's usually in a building, safe, protected, and stuck. And there's nothing wrong, again, with telling a story in that structure. There can be great values and morals taught within that structure, but there's just something very refreshing about having Ariel and Gerda go through these wonderful hero journeys, basically, and come out the other end better off for it and happier. To summarize, women often aren't allowed to put themselves in dangerous and potentially harmful situations. Andersen breaks these gender norms by allowing his protagonists, specifically the Little Mermaid and Gerda, to choose a path for themselves that will almost definitely be harsh and difficult. And even more, he allows them to at least partly succeed in this journey, while never regretting for a moment they made this decision. I think that's what partly draws me to Andersen's stories, personally. He doesn't treat his female characters like they're something fragile or something that can be broken. He instead purposefully breaks them down and builds them up into something better at the end. When I was younger, people used to tell me sometimes that some things just aren't meant for girls, that I couldn't do things because they were too dangerous or too hard or just not meant for me. And that would just frustrate me so much because it felt like they were underestimating my capabilities based on a trait that, in my view, was completely irrelevant. I think that's one of the reasons why I was attracted to H.C. Andersen's stories when I was younger. It feels like he treats his female protagonist the same way that he would treat a male protagonist. Not entirely. I'm not saying he's like a perfect feminist or completely equal in how he treats them. There's definitely issues here and there. But in some ways, I feel like he allows his female protagonist to go through the trials and tribulations that are usually associated with men. Honestly, the more that I read about H.C. Andersen, the more I get the sense that this guy might have been a good person. I mean, okay, very parasocial of me, never assume that you know somebody, all that stuff. But I don't know, there's something about reading his writings, reading what he supported. I mean, he was against anti-Semitism, he was against slavery. That's a pretty low bar, to be completely honest. But he honestly did seem to see people as people, and he understood that kindness was really important. That is, in fact, what the central theme is in The Snow Queen, and what I was originally going to make this video essay about. On top of that, there's something very unique about a lot of H.C. Andersen's work. He really likes to push those boundaries, to be transgressive, to not necessarily follow the norm. And I think that results in a lot of exploration, in a lot of interesting ideas, and why they exist as the way they are. I'm not sure what made H.C. Andersen this way. I suppose we can only really hypothesize on why, but it could possibly be because he grew up poor and was trying to enter higher society and oftentimes felt othered in a way that other minorities might also feel. Or it could be that he just has more empathy, and that's just one of his core traits. I believe that he's written before that he sees himself as having somewhat of a feminine nature, and I wonder if that allows him to see women as not some entirely different alien species like I think some men like to see us, but rather as another human being, again. It just really comes down to, I think, H.C. Andersen, seeing people as people, which, wow, really not a high bar, but, he passes it. A lot of people in history don't pass it. Anyway, I hope this video essay made sense to people who haven't read more H.C. Andersen than 99.9% of the human population. But yeah, if anyone else besides my professor is watching this, hope you enjoyed the video. Like and subscribe. Bye!